I have some news for you today because a teachers' union in Alberta just announced a strike talking about just not showing up to work, and it would shut down classrooms across the province in just weeks. We've also got some reactions from Ottawa where Prime Minister Mark Carney is said to be furious, blasting Alberta's government for escalating the standoff. And at the same time, families and businesses are bracing for the economic fallout as parents are scrambling and markets are reacting to the uncertainty. And that's not all. The strike is already fueling fresh talk of Alberta's sovereignty, with critics accusing Ottawa of once again leaving the West to fend for itself. Some are even warning this could ignite a wider labor revolt across the entire country. I'm going to break it all down, what's happening and why it matters, and how it could shake the very foundation of Canada's economy. So, without further ado,
teachers will go on strike next month if they are unable to reach a settlement with the province. The teachers union says parents and students need to prepare for a possible school shutdown starting October 6th.
President Jason Schilling says those details are still being ironed out. It's too early to tell if the province would see rolling strikes or if all schools would close immediately. Schilling says the public education system in Alberta is in crisis and the time for half measures is over.
Critical for this government to claim that it values education while spending the least in Canada.
Now, as you just watched, Alberta has officially reached a breaking point. The Promises teachers have voted overwhelmingly to strike, with more than 95% backing a walkout scheduled for October 6th. That's not a small move. This would shut down classrooms across Alberta, disrupting the daily lives of families. And this is going to put educators out of the classroom. Education stopping for hundreds of thousands of students. The union says they've been pushed into a corner. Teachers are frustrated with wage freezes during years of rising inflation. Just like the flight attendants, being super frustrated with inflation with Carney and the government. You can see it. People are starting to act because the government isn't hubbing them like it should. They're frustrated with packed classrooms, with students that can't get the education they need. They can't help them. And above all, they're frustrated with what they see as Ottawa and Edmonton both looks like turning a blind eye to reality on the ground. And for parents, this is more than numbers. They're wondering how are they going to go to work if their kids have nowhere to go. Childcare is expensive. They're bracing for insane costs, lost wages, and uncertainty stretching weeks, maybe months. And remember, it's not just teachers. Alberta's health workers also rejected a deal just days ago. So, they got that going on too. They've warned about unsafe staffing levels and dangerous working conditions. So, now you got classrooms and you got hospitals on the brink. That's a lot of pressure. And a workforce that is feeling ignored.
And hire more education assistants. But if they just come back and say, give us more money, that's not going to address the foundational issues we're hearing from teachers. What we're hearing from teachers is they want to have smaller class sizes and they want more hands on deck to help with complex classroom conditions. And we are prepared to talk about that, but their starting point needs to understand that when we say 12% over 4 years and we've settled with half of our bargaining units on that, that's all there is for wage increases, because we know that there are trade-offs.
Well, that pretty much clears that up. Premier Danielle Smith insists her government has put a serious offer on the table. 12% over 4 years. She says is one of the most competitive agreements in the country, but union leaders argue that doesn't come close to addressing the real crisis. This strike isn't happening in isolation. It's building on years of tension, and it's happening at a moment when national politics are already divided, which is exactly why Prime Minister Mark Carney is watching Alberta closely and why insiders say his reaction has been nothing short of furious. And to understand why Alberta's teachers are ready to walk off the job, you got to look at the years of buildup that led to this moment. This strike didn't just happen, okay? It's about one contract, one negotiation gone wrong again and again and again and again and again. It's about years of frustration piling up until the dam finally broke. Did you hear that? Teachers pointing to the long history of wage freezes. While the cost of living keeps going up and up and up, their salaries are staying flat. Families saw grocery bills spike, rent, mortgages climb, gas prices, all at record highs. And yet, the teachers are saying the pay never kept pace, leaving them effectively earning less and less than they did a decade ago. And add to that class sizes that continue to grow, making it harder for kids to get one-on-one attention. And it's not hard to see why the anger has been boiling over. At the same time, the province has been wrestling with another crisis, healthcare. Alberta's nurses and support staff have been sounding the alarm about unsafe conditions for years. Just last week, they rejected a deal saying it didn't even scratch the surface of the problems they face on the job. That rejection sent a loud message that frustration isn't confined to the classroom. It's across the board, multiple industries and sectors. And here's where the bigger picture comes in. Alberta doesn't just feel shortchanged by its own government. There's been a deep-rooted belief that Ottawa has been stacking the deck against the province for years. Many Albertans argue that they contribute far more to Confederation than they receive in return. Every year, billions leave the province through federal transfers, while local schools and hospitals scramble for resources. To many, the solution seems obvious. Stop draining Alberta's revenues and redirect those funds to urgent needs at home. This resentment has simmered for decades, but with each labor dispute it edges closer to a full-scale eruption. Teachers now say their strike is about far more than salary grids or class-size ratios. It reflects a province that feels cornered and unsupported, a province convinced it is carrying more than its share of the load while getting less back in return. That brings the focus to Ottawa and to Prime Minister Mark Carney, who now faces a crisis far larger than any single union dispute. His response to Alberta's defiance has been blunt, emotional, and very public. When news of the strike vote reached Ottawa, insiders say Carney was livid, seeing Alberta's showdown not merely as a labor issue, but as a direct challenge to federal authority. Critics argue that if Ottawa stopped draining Alberta's resources and accelerated pipelines and infrastructure projects, there would be more money to go around. This framing underscores a key point. Ottawa does not want the dispute cast as a fair fight between teachers and the province. Instead, it wants Canadians to view Alberta as escalating tensions for its own gain. Carney also knows that if this strike becomes a symbol of wider frustration with Ottawa, the issue ceases to be about schools and becomes about sovereignty. National media have amplified that angle. Prominent outlets have accused Premier Danielle Smith of stoking division and using the strike to fuel Alberta's ongoing disputes with the federal government. Editorials out of Toronto and Montreal have been scathing, warning that Alberta's tactics are destabilizing Canada's fragile economy. For Carney, this is about more than headlines. He is walking a political tightrope. If he comes down too hard on Alberta, he risks inflaming separatist sentiment. If he appears too weak, critics will accuse him of allowing provinces to dictate terms to Ottawa. That balancing act explains his sharp reaction and why his frustration grows every time Smith doubles down. What began as a standoff between teachers and the province is now fueling something much bigger, exactly what Ottawa hoped to avoid. Within hours of the strike announcement, voices in Alberta's sovereignty movement linked the dispute directly to Ottawa's treatment of the West. Social media lit up with familiar arguments about billions flowing out of Alberta while essential services deteriorate. Pro-independence rallies seized the moment, shifting slogans from pipelines and carbon taxes to teachers' wages and federal neglect. Their message is resonating. If Alberta had control over its own finances, its workers would not be forced to strike for fair treatment. Premier Smith is trying to walk her own fine line. On one hand, she frames the strike as evidence that Ottawa ignores Alberta's needs. On the other, she stops short of calling it a sovereignty issue outright, aware that pushing too far could alienate moderates and weary parents. Nevertheless, her repeated references to federal interference give sovereignty advocates exactly the opening they sought, and they are not letting it go. Wexit organizers and smaller independence groups are flooding local radio shows and community meetings, arguing that this dispute proves Alberta would be better off on its own. In their telling, the strike is not merely about classrooms, hospitals, or lost revenue. It is about freedom from a federal government that does not share Alberta's priorities. What was once a simmering debate has become a bonfire. A fight over education has become a rallying cry for independence. This is precisely what has Ottawa most worried. Alberta's unrest is inspiring other provinces to question Confederation itself. Labor unrest has already been spreading nationwide. Healthcare workers in multiple provinces have rejected tentative deals. Public sector unions from British Columbia to Ontario are warning of strike action, and even transportation and logistics workers are beginning to organize, threatening supply chain disruptions. Ottawa is scrambling to contain the damage. Prime Minister Carney is leaning on premiers to keep critical services running, but his appeals are falling flat. Local unions accuse him of lecturing workers while ignoring their basic concerns. In Alberta, the dynamic has already pushed teachers and health workers into open defiance, and Ottawa now fears that Alberta's example could embolden others to follow suit. Either way, the strike is no longer just Alberta's fight. It has become a national test of how Canada manages labor disputes in a time of deep economic strain. With every day the crisis drags on, the country's stability grows more fragile. Multiple sectors are grinding to a halt. The impact does not stop at schools or hospitals, but ripples through the entire economy. Parents are forced to stay home from work, small businesses are losing revenue, and local governments are burning through reserves to maintain emergency services. Economists warn that if the disruption continues, Alberta could suffer a contraction worse than during the oil price crash. Nationally, investor confidence is sliding, and the Canadian dollar has dipped on fears that prolonged strikes will depress productivity and push inflation higher. Even international markets are questioning whether Ottawa has the political capital to contain the crisis. For everyday Canadians, the fallout is simple: higher costs, fewer services, and no clear end in sight. The longer Ottawa hesitates, the deeper the economic pain in Alberta becomes. Many parents rally behind the teachers, calling the strike a wake-up call about underfunded classrooms and overworked staff. Others are furious, accusing unions of holding children hostage to score political points. This divide has spilled into the national conversation, with hashtags like #StandWithTeachers and #EndTheStrikeNow trending side by side. The crucial questions now are how long Alberta's teachers are prepared to stay on the picket lines, and how long Ottawa will watch the situation spiral. Union leaders insist they are ready for the long haul, citing overflowing strike funds and strong rank-and-file support, making a quick resolution unlikely. What began as a labor dispute has become a full-blown constitutional tug-of-war that raises fundamental questions about the future of Confederation. For Canadians watching from the outside, the political bickering is ugly and underscores how unprepared both levels of government seem to be for a crisis of this scale. Call to action. If you want to stay informed about how this unfolding crisis affects Alberta, Ottawa, and the entire country, make sure you subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with friends and colleagues. Your comments and perspectives matter. Drop them below and join the discussion. Together we can shine a light on the issues shaping Canada's future.